Thank you for tuning in. You're watching Foreign Correspondents. I'm Min Son-hee with our group of foreign journalists. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be back.
Now, the weather has definitely gotten milder here in Korea, making it a great time for leisurely strolls. In fact, if you were to recommend a place ideal for a walk or a picnic, Frank, because you have a daughter, where would you pick?
Well, actually, I like to ride my bicycle along the Hangang and get out toward Paldong and Ingulsan. The bike path along the river there is really beautiful. There's a tunnel, there's a beautiful bridge that goes across the river and areas to picnic. That's a spot I hope to get to this year for sure.
That sounds great. Fred?
Well, if you like walking, I advise you to walk along the Seoul Fortress, you know, the former city walls. Many parts were restored and you can see there is beautiful views of Seoul City from many different places. It's really nice to walk.
I see. Don?
Seoul is actually one of the best capitals in the world for hiking and walking. You can climb up Pukan-san, Mount Pukan on an afternoon up and back. Or you can go up Pugak-san behind the Blue House. There's so many places to walk and actually to hike in Seoul. It's remarkable from that point of view, and especially in the spring when the flowers are beginning to bloom.
Right. In this edition of Foreign Correspondents, we explore the scandals of confidence of a country's president. And along with our own political fallout in light of Choesun-sil, we look at that in neighboring Japan, where Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is witnessing a drop in approval ratings in light of his wife's ties to a far right-wing group. The one name that has dominated headlines in Korea since last fall is Choesun-sil, who is the center of a sprawling influence peddling scandal. Choesun-sil is the fifth daughter of Choi Tae-min, who is known for being former President Park Geun-hye's mentor, and she has remained a close confidant for some 4 decades. Choi is believed to have used that friendship as a source of power and influence. Choesun-sil is said to have been in control of 2 foundations, Mir and K-Sports. She's accused of forcing some 50 companies into making donations worth a total of roughly $70 million to the 2 entities. Choi has also allegedly meddled in numerous state affairs. The allegations against Choi were so grave that the massive scandal surrounding her eventually led to the ouster of former President Park Geun-hye. Over in Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has also found himself embroiled in a scandal. At the heart of it is none other than First Lady Akio Abe, and the fallout has sent Abe's approval ratings downhill. It was recently brought to light that last year in June, school operator Morimoto Kakuen, known for its affiliation with right-wing groups, sought to establish an elementary school and managed to purchase state-owned land in Osaka at only 1/7 of its appraisal value. This led to speculation that the school operator received massive benefits.
不当に安い値段でこの国有地がですね売却されたのではないかという疑惑であります。
What added to this is the fact that Akio Abe, until recently, was the honorary principal of the school in question. This has all led to suspicions that Prime Minister Abe may have influenced the land deal, offering it at a steep discount.
総理大臣夫人という肩書きをつけられたということについてはですね、それは我々も必ずしも想定をしていなかったところでございますが、先方の言い方もそうではなかったものでありますが。
The Prime Minister has denied the accusations, but other details that have surfaced are putting him in a tighter position. There are even accounts that the Prime Minister made donations to the school operator. Those closest to the people in power play a pivotal part in supporting the leadership, but the recent series of events show that they can also be responsible for their downfalls. Before we start our discussion today, perhaps we should begin by defining the term confident. When referring to a president's confidant, are we talking about people within his or her administration, or family members, or close friends? Frank?
Well, I think we're talking about people outside the government that are that person's friend. I mean, you know, even a president needs somebody to talk to share their workday with and the challenges that they face during their work, you know? And I think that's who we're referring to, people that they can share, you know, their sort of secrets with and share their trust with.
Choi Soon-sil is described as former President Park's confidant, but this description fails to encapsulate what appears to have been a very complex relationship. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, I think you're right. The relationship with Choi Soon-sil started much before even Choi Soon-sil was born, because Park Geun-hye was very close to her father, Choi Soon-sil's father, who was a religious figure. Some people say he was a leader of a religious cult, who started to be close to her when she was very young after her mother was assassinated. Some people say as well that he pretended to be able to communicate with her dead mother.
최태민 목사가 이런 비리가 있고 나쁜 사람이다. 공격을 딱 해놓은 다음에 남을 음해하기 위해서 이런 얘기까지 지어내느냐.
And after they stayed close together until his death in 1994. And after that, somehow Choi Soon-sil and her sister picked up and continued to maintain this relationship. So it's really long, and there is many things we don't know actually about the relationship between Choi Soon-sil and Park Geun-hye.
Right. Don, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's very sad that this lonely woman at the top, Park Geun-hye, really didn't have friends. And she had this one friend from childhood, this daughter of one of her father's, relationships. Whether it was a spiritual relationship or advisory relationship, I'm not sure. But she couldn't reach out to a circle of friends. And she didn't, she was known not to really talk to her cabinet ministers or even some of her aides very much, you know.
대면 보고가 그렇게 중요하다고 생각하시면 지금까지 했던 대면 보고를 좀 더 이렇게 늘려나가는 방향으로 하겠습니다만은 그게 필요하다고 생각하세요?
Instead, she relied upon this personal relationship. Did she have other friends? Not many. And so she's almost, I'm tempted to say that Park Geun-hye is almost a tragic figure. And I think it's very sorry that she had to, have this kind of life and this kind of downfall.
Right.
And I think she actually, part of her apologies sort of shed a bit of light on her disappointment with that relationship. And I think it's a little bit improper maybe to consider Choi Soon-sil as a confidant, because I think she really took advantage of her relationship with Park Geun-hye to enrich herself through these foundations and this sort of corrupt activities that she was engaging in.
But she probably knew, Park Geun-hye probably knew it, no? It's not like she was unaware of what was happening.
Yes, I agree with you. I think probably the former president was aware of this, but as Don mentioned, she was sort of starved for some type of relationship, some type of friendship. And so I think maybe she just kind of overlooked that and sort of pushed it out of her mind to satisfy her need to have some type of friend.
She didn't have a husband either. She didn't, and nobody she could, confide in and go back to after a day's work and, pour out her troubles. She didn't have any of that.
Do you believe her personality was to blame? What I mean is, there have been those who've accused her of being too reserved and perhaps of choosing to keep close those who are willing to compliment and not criticize. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's odd to see the same type of person now in the White House in Washington. And I think as a president, you need somebody in your inner circle that's going to behave something as an ombudsman and say, hey, look, you're wrong here, to have a dissenting voice. And that dissenting voice can help a president and help legislators make good decisions. It's a really, I think it's a necessary element of an administration. If you just have a bunch of yes men around, you're going to end up making some bad decisions.
Let's turn our attention to neighbouring Japan for a while. As I reported earlier, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is struggling to shake off a scandal that not only sheds a ultra-nationalist light on both him and his wife, but also hints that strings were pulled in the purchase of state-owned land by a far-right educational institution. In light of these allegations, what are his chances of winning an unprecedented third term in office? We'll start with you, Don.
Well, I think he faces a lot of trouble, a lot of criticism. You know, there have been a succession over the years of Japanese prime ministers losing their jobs, and he could just fall into line. He's been prime minister for quite a while now, this scandal really reveals the whole sort of conservative nature, deeply conservative nature of his government, of his rule, of his party, and so forth. I think a lot of people are going to be turned off by this. The upside, though, is that there's an awful lot of conservative sentiment in Japan, awful lot of nationalism, you might say ethno-nationalism in Japan, and perhaps on the basis of that kind of support, he can pull it off and go to a third term. But I think there's going to be problems for that ahead for him.
From a South Korean perspective, I'm really encouraged by this whole scandal. Part of that has brought it up, there is the issue of the land, but there's also the issue of that figure himself and the ultranationalism that he's introducing into the school system. This has been a real problem in relations between South Korea and Japan. These ultranationalist trends in different elements of society, including, you know, Abe and the government and in their treatment of history textbooks, and this education figure to be brought out, for this to be brought out and to be alarming to Japanese people and upsetting Japanese people, I think could be encouraging to South Koreans.
It's relatively common, I suppose, to see people close to the president become involved in politics without any prior experience. What are your thoughts on this, Frank?
Well, I think the temptation just must be incredible. I mean, the amount of money that's involved, just, you know, some simple little influence decision over the purchase of land or some other aspect that a huge business conglomerate is involved in. And if you're the friend of the president or a relative of the president and you can somehow whisper in the president's ear or influence some huge decision like that in some minor level and expect to get away with it and earn enough money to set yourself up for life and probably your family for life, the temptation here must be just incredible. On the other side of things, you know, I read a little bit of research about crime, and it said the most important deterrent to crime is the surety of being caught. Not the length of sentences or some other issue, but the surety of being caught. So I think that if we can ensure that politicians and those around them are going to be caught, and there's enough transparency in this management of that kind of thing can be reduced.
Former President Park was not alone in her struggle against scandal during her term in office. Quite a number of Korean leaders face similar fates in light of the less than favorable actions of their family members. We have details in this report. Many Korean leaders ahead of her were also dragged through the mud because of the people closest to them. Former leader Kim Young-sam, the 14th president of the country, in the 1990s saw his second son Kim Hyun-chol wield massive influence. But in 1997, the son was sentenced to prison for bribery and tax evasion. He, in effect, dragged down his father's reputation with his own.
애사에 조심하고 바르게 처신하도록 가르치지 못한 것 제 자신의 불찰입니다.
Korea's 15th President Kim Dae-jung also had to apologize to the public for scandals involving his sons. All three of the former president's sons were either convicted of scandals related to power abuse or accused by prosecutors of such charges.
거듭 죄송한 말씀을 드려 마지 않습니다.
The 16th Korean President Roh Moo-hyun tried to stay vigilant against these close-circle scandals, but he was still unable to prevent what was to come, later finding his reputation tarnished by his elder brother, who was convicted of bribery.
본의 아니게 국민 여러분께 많은 심려를 끼쳐드린 데 대해서 매우 송구스럽게 생각합니다.
Former President Lee Myung-bak, Korea's 17th president, saw his older brother Lee Sang-deuk accede to power as Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. But before his younger brother's term was even up, the older Lee landed behind bars for his involvement in a savings bank bribery scandal.
국민 여러분께 큰 심려를 끼쳐드렸습니다.
These political scandals are not limited to Korea. In China last year, the mayor of Tianjin, a close aide of President Xi Jinping, was ensnared in an anti-graft investigation. Blue Bush also saw Vice President Dick Cheney accused of corruption due to the company he formerly led, Harley-Burton. The accusations involved reconstruction projects carried out in Iraq in 2003. Brazil, like Korea, has also seen its many leaders and those close to them embroiled in scandals. Former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Dilma Rousseff, and current leader Michel Temer have all been entangled in scandals. Those close to the center of power have often enjoyed seemingly endless reaches of power, but once exposed for their wrongdoings, they're faced with the harsh reality of accountability. As I mentioned in the report, the sad reality is quite a number of Korean leaders have struggled to deal with the political fallout of a scandal involving a family member or a close aide. Why is this a recurring problem here in Korea? Fred?
Well, first, I think there is a higher scrutiny than in the past, probably, and I think the level of acceptance to corruption is getting lower and lower. We tolerate less and less this corruption.
I see. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Well, I think it could have something to do with the nature of Korean society and in the close-knit family structure that exists in South Korean society. In my family, you know, my parents-in-law, they have one son and 3 daughters, and that son turned out to be quite successful, and he kind of lifted the whole family. And they put a lot of emphasis and a lot of support behind him, but it seems like the whole family has been lifted. The connections, I think, of family in South Korea may be much stronger. And so those people that attain those higher positions in South Korean society feel responsible for those people, and some of those people then, you know, can tend to take advantage of that in improper ways. But, you know, on the bright side, I think that the strength of the South Korean family fabric is a positive thing, but of course in terms of corruption of officials, it's not something that plays out well, perhaps.
I see. In your opinion, though, how is it that these individuals, family members, how is it that they're able to wield such power, though, such influence?
Well, you know, I think there's an assumption on the part of every family leader that their sons, daughters, if they marry well, and they want them to marry somebody of their same level, will take over. You know, you don't have one of these huge business conglomerates in which the family members are simply excluded from succession. It's assumed that they'll succeed, that they will succeed their father or their grandfather, that it will remain under family control. And this is a huge factor. This deep-seated sense of succession and of family loyalty is pervasive here, and I think from as I observe it, from what I've seen, years ago I wrote a book about the Hyundai empire, Chung Ju-young and so forth, the founder of Hyundai. He made sure that all his family members succeeded him in one way or another. The pressure upon them was very intense, by the way. 2 of his sons have wound up committing suicide. Another one was killed in a motor vehicle accident. It wasn't all, you know, a great, happy thing to be to be in line for inheriting great power. But you know, that's the way it is here.
Then these individuals, these close aides and family members of presidents, are they at the heart of the collusion between big businesses and political circles, do you think, Frank?
Well, I think it's part of the system and the ability of politicians to take advantage of their positions. I think that the family members understand that there's an inordinate amount of power vested in South Korea. I think in the presidency, if you look at, you know, the ministries and the media here in South Korea and these parachute appointments that take place coming out of the Blue House, you know, it's obvious that an incredible amount of power, you know, rests in the executive here, and that sort of system where the president of whatever organization is, and the power that person wields is something that's understood by the hangers-on or confidants or family members of people in that position, and then they're more able to exploit that.
On the issue of liability, to what extent is a president responsible for the corrupt actions of family members? Don?
Well, the president should theoretically be very stern with family members. I think Kim Dae-jung, as president, said that, well, he was very sorry that his sons were so, corrupt or revealed to be involved in various corrupted activities. But you wonder whether that was sincere or whether he was just paying lip service. Yet the president should distance himself, or in case of Park Geun-hye, herself, from family members and from friends and so forth. But at least there's an attempt here to root out some of this corruption and to do something about it. Whereas in other countries, and the Philippines is a good example, they have an awful lot of headlines about this and that. But basically, massive corruption goes on. Family structures go on ruling the place. Nepotism is assumed on a scale that is not quite the case here in Korea. I don't think Kim Young-sam's son is running for president, nor I don't think Kim Dae-jung's sons are running for president or going to take over the government. So I think actually, in a sense, Korea is more disciplined than a lot of countries. But the fact that they have these trials, the fact that they have these investigations, is a good sign. Obviously things could be an awful lot better, but nevertheless, we shouldn't be overly critical. We might praise Korea for going after some of these people.
Right. Frank, what qualities within a leader would work to curb perhaps corruption within his family members?
Being an only child, maybe. I think to use a popular phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And really in South Korea, we've seen the president again. Too much power rested in the president. The family members of presidents also, I'm sure they just get thrown offers right and left from businesses hoping for a little bit of influence with the government. Businesses that again are looking for government contracts or want to avoid some type of investigation or some slight degree of favoritism that could save them or earn them millions and millions of dollars.
Sometimes I think this corruption is endemic at all levels. We have cases of teachers expecting gifts from parents and of doctors to get to see an eminent doctor. There's a lot of gift giving that goes on. As foreigners, we're not involved in that. We just hear about it. But there's corruption going on, gift giving going on, massive gift giving going on. I understand in the armed forces, lower ranking officers, their wives wind up giving gifts to the wives of the higher ranking officers.
Which is why we hope that the Kim Young-nam Act will serve to curb that.
Exactly, right. Very good point.
Okay, on a lighter note, in reality, even getting a glimpse of a president is rare for most people. So the opportunity to actually make an acquaintance would be quite a chance. If you had the chance to befriend a president, would you take up that chance, Frank, without
Absolutely,
a second thought?
in a heartbeat. I'd love an insight into what goes on in that office. It would be, it would be incredible, especially if you were in a situation where the president could really speak honestly to you, because I think that people in those positions of politics and diplomacy really guard themselves very carefully and what they say very carefully, and it'd be nice to know what they really thought.
Right.
It's super hard to get access, by the way, to Chung Woo-dae, especially for foreigners. Korean media may say that they don't have all the access they want, but at least they're there. It's very hard for us to get access. I remember in the old days, I used to interview Kim Dae-jung when he was a dissident. When he became president, I think I got one interview in 5 years, and that was when one of my top editors came, and also the interview was for him, and I was there too and asked questions. But I was invited to one lunch for correspondents and was given the opportunity to ask one pre-planned question. I had to tell them what the question was. I mean, getting access to the president of Korea for a foreigner is extremely difficult, and You know, if I could have such access, it'd be wonderful, you know, but it's just beyond imagination.
Well, I think you've got better access than either one of us, and I hope that if I stay in Korea for another 20 years, maybe I'll get to ask the president a question.
Right.
Right, last year, Korea ranked 52nd among 176 nations in the Corruption Perceptions Index, according to the entity Transparency International Korea. That means out of 100 points, we scored 53 points for national integrity. Now, that's apparently the lowest since the compiling of such figures. It's not a flattering standing, one that can only be improved if corruption is rooted out of the government, making greater way for integrity within the nation. Thank you for watching.